Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 love languages. And this is a book authored by Dr. Gary Chapman. And his tagline, if you get on their website, what you're going to find everywhere is it's never too late to start loving better. It's never too late to start loving better. And Dr. Chapman, he started his career as a marriage counselor, right? And so he takes a lot of this view from the perspective of marriage. But since he authored the very first book, he has since given us titles geared towards children, teens, singles, men, and even a military edition of the 5 love languages that looks at that deployment, that long transition time apart, that big life transition when someone comes back. So something I want you to know, though I'm preaching from the original book today, the 5 love languages geared towards marriage, these principles can be applied everywhere. Okay. Any relationship you have. They even wrote one called the 5 love languages of appreciation in the workplace. Taking that word love that maybe you're not going to carry into the workplace with you and flipping it. The 5 love languages, spoiler alert, it's the same 5, but they give them like a slightly different word to be a little more workplace culture appropriate. Okay. And so you can apply what we're talking about here today in any relationship in your life. All right. So I want to make sure if I said marriage and you tuned out, okay, tune back in because it goes everywhere. All right. There's also, I think I said this, but there's a singles edition too that I have never read, but I know I've had conversations with some singles in our church of like, how do I figure this out? How do I, how do I know who the right person is? And I'd really encourage you to pick up a copy of that because I think you'll start to see the best version of love that you should be looking for. So, all right. But what's this love language idea about in general, right? So before we really get there, it's important to be on the same page of what love is, because he starts this book and he's talking about how love is the most complicated and often confused concept in our society. And part of this is like the English language is a wreck, right? Is anyone a second language speaker? I don't know if we have any in this room, but I was talking to someone the other day and she was like, yeah, your words don't make sense. It doesn't. But we often mix up even these words, love. So I'm going to pick on Pastor Aeric a lot today, so hopefully he still likes me at the end of the service. But so Pastor Aeric, he loves Chipotle, right? Loves it, especially if the worker actually listens to him when he says extra rice and like fills the bowl with rice. If they're stingy, he doesn't love them so much. Okay, but here's the thing: he loves Chipotle, but he also loves his kids. He loves this church. He loves me. Okay. Probably the most, but it's fine. Do you think that he loves Chipotle and our boys on the same level? Jesus. It might depend on the day. Maybe I should have picked the church. That might have been. You'll notice that I did not choose to use the comparison of Captain America or Marvel movies for this illustration. There's a reason for that. I'm not really sure I want to know where I rank against those, okay? But we use the same word to define these like really varied layers of feelings, right? It's not the same. I can tell you, as much as we joke about it, he loves me more than he loves Chipotle, okay? Otherwise, he's going to be in trouble later today. But we use it on a very broad scale. On top of that, we also intermix this idea of falling in love versus being in love. And we consider them the same thing. But the process of falling in love physically, emotionally, mentally is completely different than being in love. Falling in love is like this euphoria. It's all every romance movie every chick flick, every, Disney princess movie. It's like these big feelings, these like everything is right. That person can do no wrong. And then the honeymoon period ends or the rose-colored glasses come off and you're like, oh. But what you think then is either I don't love them or they don't love me anymore. right? Instead of realizing that falling in love and being in love is really different. And a lot of relationships end up falling apart here. It's because they don't understand that love is more a choice than a feeling. Love is more a choice than a feeling. To feel loved is a primary human need. It's our most basic emotional need. It's not to fall in love, but to genuinely be loved by another. And Dr. Chapman, I love the way he says it, to know a love that grows out of reason and choice. Reason and choice. It has to grow. This is the kind of love that lasts. And many, many couples, unfortunately, have failed to make the transition from falling in love to being in love. Something Pastor Aeric said, we had a conversation one time about why we felt like his parents are still together. They are celebrating 30 this year, maybe, or something close to that. 36. They've been together a while, okay? And we had a conversation one time, and I remember he said, I think they just decided they were gonna stay together no matter what. It's a choice. So recently, talking about these 5 love languages, I have a little story to tell you, and it'll make sense, so hang with me. But recently, our family, we ate dinner together, right? We went to Subway. And Rigby, he ordered his favorite sandwich, turkey, cheese, and black olives, which is disgusting, by the way. But it's his favorite. And as he's eating it, he starts to talk about how good his tuna sandwich is. Oh, my tuna sandwich. It's so good. I love this. We're like, Rigby, you're not eating tuna. You're eating turkey. He said, no, it's tuna. And you're thinking like he's 4 and he mixed up the word. No, he makes a conscious choice often to call something a different word. And we're trying to explain to him, like, buddy, that's not going to work. No one's going to know what you're talking about. Because what do you think? The next time we go to Subway, say you take him to Subway, right? And he says, I want a tuna sandwich. What's coming out? Not turkey slices. It's coming out as tuna, right? And then he's going to sit down and he's going to start eating that sandwich. He's going to say, you ordered it wrong. Right? No, but this is the best example of what we tend to do with how we love one another. We say one thing, but we're expecting something different every single time. And then we get mad at the other person because they can't figure it out. Right? Anyone relate to that? I see a couple people looking at each other over here. All right. So I know this is a funny example, but this is like some of the difference of what we try to do in our relationships and how we try to communicate what kind of things we need in order to feel loved. It's like we've made up our own language and we want people to start talking in that language without ever taking the time to teach it to them, right? So luckily, in his book, Dr. Chapman breaks down that there are 5 primary love languages, okay? And, all right, Eric is very, I'm a unique, precious snowflake kind of guy. And he's like, don't put me in a box. None of those are the right answer. They are. But he and I think several folks in this room, as soon as I tell you you fit into one of these 5 places, you're like, no, I don't. Please hear, these are like the 5 broad categories, but there are hundreds and thousands of like dialects within this and ways to express this. So you can start by learning your partner's basic primary love language. You still have some work to do to find their individual expression that makes sense. So, but these 5 love languages we're talking about today are a great starting point, okay? And there's one thing I want to give you though as a warning before we start, and I think that Uncle Ben probably said it best. With great power comes great responsibility, okay? Or Voltaire, also credited to Voltaire, not always a Spider-Man quote, okay? But here's the thing, and this might be like the most important thing you hear today, okay? So hang with me for a second. As soon as you understand your partner's primary love language or whatever relationship you're viewing this in, yes, you know how to love them in the best way possible. You also know the best, most immediate and damaging way to hurt them. So You have to use these carefully. You have to know, you have to make the choice. I am using this with love, not to hurt. It's important to remember that the object of loving someone is not to get what you want, but to do something solely for the well-being of the one you love. So the emotional need for love, it's deeply ingrained in all of us, right? It begins as children. We come out needing love, and we may not be able to process it fully at the same way, but we come out needing to feel love. And how you were loved as a child does a lot to shape how you can give and receive love as an adult. And for some of us, that's not good news, right? For some of us, we got a great example. We know how to be loved, and others, we are still desperate for the love we didn't receive when we were young. It's important to understand pieces of that as you go forward. But Dr. Chapman, he uses this really great analogy that I want to explain, and it's a good visual, but it's imagine inside you, there's like this empty vessel, right? So he calls it a love tank. And that each of us carries this inside of us. And when our tank is full, which means that we regularly receive love in our primary love language, then we feel secure, connected, and emotionally healthy. But when our tank is empty, we may feel neglected, frustrated, or disconnected, and our relationships will feel strained. So, if you're interested in describing your primary love language, there is a quiz on their website, or if you grab our copy of the book out front, I think there's a QR code you can snap in there. My guess is, as I'm talking today, you'll have some idea, but they're like most, personality type things or character quizzes. You can hear something and say, oh, that's me. And there's a lot of ways that you can get that a little confused. For example, most men believe that their primary love language is physical touch. It's not always. That is a different need. That is a biological need, not an emotional one, okay? And you're wired that way. And there are men that is the primary language, but it's things like that you've got to sort out where you actually fall, okay? So Pastor Aeric and I, we took this quiz not long after we got married. A year or two in, maybe we led a life group through this topic of conversation. We took the quiz together, and we both kind of had ideas of where we fell. But the quiz, when you take it, it will lay out all 5 and give you your score of all 5. So then it lists them in order of, my top, second, third, fourth, last. And Pastor Aeric, he got his primary love language as words of affirmation. And this love language is expressing love through spoken or written encouragement, praise, appreciation, and kind words. So, like I said, when you take the quiz, it tells you your highest. It also tells you your lowest. Guess what my lowest score was? Words of affirmation. Okay. And so this posed an issue for us, is that his highest love language, I was really bad at, because typically the way you most receive love is the way you naturally give it. So the fact that my score was so low meant that I was not naturally giving my husband any kind of love in the language he wanted. And this is illustrated by a story I think he's told on me before, that when we met, the primary term of endearment that I used was turd. Yep. I thought that would just make him feel real warm and cozy inside, okay, right? Needless to say, it did not. My word-craving husband didn't feel good when I called him a turd, okay? So... Weird. So here I am, presented with a choice, right? Am I gonna get better at my husband's primary love language? And I decided that I really wanted to do this. Spoiler alert, it was not easy. And sometimes I'm still not very good at it. But for 2 years, I set an alarm in my phone. It went off at 4 p.m. every single day, and all it said was, words are important. Words are important. And there's nothing like super sexy about this, right? He knew this alarm was happening. Okay. Like he saw it enough times. He knew it was happening. But for me, it was a reminder to evaluate the words I had spoken to my husband that day, determine if I had given any kind of compliment, encouragement, anything like that. Also assess if I had given the opposite of compliments or any, what had I used words that would make him feel less. And if I hadn't given any kind of compliment, sometimes I would send a text off right then. Sometimes it was a reminder of like, I need to make a point to do this when I get home. And I wouldn't say I succeeded in giving him some sort of words of affirmation every day. But what it did do was start to make me think about that significantly more over and over. It removed things like turd from my vocabulary, and I got better at verbally expressing things. However, I still have this issue where like when I try to say nice things, they come out and they feel really awkward and weird. Okay. And so also not the most romantic. But one of the things I learned is one of the great dialects of words of affirmation is written words. And fun fact, Pastor Aeric loves to receive written words. I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, we celebrated Dwell's 3rd birthday and we had thank you cards on the seat and several of you picked those up and wrote a note. And I stood in our kitchen after service and I read those and I was like, oh, that's really nice. Like, that's sweet of them. And I looked over and Pastor Aeric was reading them and he was like tears streaming down his face in our kitchen. Okay. Like just loving every moment. And I bet that he could probably tell you every person who wrote one. And I can guarantee they are in his office somewhere where he knows where they are, a special place he can come back to and refer to those. This dialect of written words is really beneficial to me as I am weak in this area because not only can I get it out once and it removes the awkwardness if I can read it, right? And take my time with it rather than have whatever's happening on my face be seen in the moment. But the nice thing is sometimes these written words get me by later on when I don't even know it because he picks them up and reads them again. Okay, so there's things like that. You have to find your person's unique ways that they receive this. If you are trying to love someone whose primary love language is words of affirmation, consider testing out several expressions of this, including specifically encouraging words. So you're doing really good at this. Encouraging is to provide courage, right? So if they're trying something new, affirming them in that or encouraging them that I know you can do it. I have faith in you. Kind words, that is like a whole gamut of things. Okay. Right. But then also humble words. And sometimes humble words are apologies or forgiveness or I heard you when you said I wasn't doing this well and I want to do better. Okay. Something I particularly love about the way the 5 Love Languages book is written is that as we talk about each one of these, you'll find each one has its own chapter. And at the end of the chapter, it has a list of 10 practical ways you can try out this love language with your person. So I'd encourage you, grab a copy, look at those. But the simplest examples I'll leave you with for words of affirmation today is handwritten notes, I think is a great one, and meaningful compliments. Something beyond I'm proud of you. The book, what I love that they'll do is they'll have something that says like, instead of saying I'm proud of you, say I'm really proud that you took the step to XYZ, whatever it is. And they'll encourage you, they'll show you exactly how to flip the script of what you're saying or what you're doing in each love language with practical examples. Okay, so now that I've admitted my faults, okay, I have to tell you that while I scored super low on Eric's top love language, he also scored super low on my top love language. So this felt really encouraging to our relationship success like 2 years into marriage, right? It's like we don't know how to love each other at all, but we learned. So my top love language is physical touch. This is communicating love through physical closeness and touch, which can include everything from hugs to holding hands to sex. Okay. Disclaimer on this particular love language. Boundaries are important. Boundaries are important. Considering the type of relationship you're trying to explore this in, there is physical touch that would be incredibly inappropriate. There's physical touch that would be really offensive. So you have to be careful. You have to know the boundaries. I'm going to cut it off there so I don't end up in a lot of different tangents. But in my opinion, personally, I think this is the most self-explanatory one, but probably because it's mine. So I will explain it some, because to Eric, it might have been Chinese. See, at the beginning of our relationship, for him, I think physical touch was still more of a means to an end kind of thing, right? And I also knew that that's what it meant to him. So that is a tricky thing, because unfortunately for me, what that created was a confirmation of a lie that I had built up in my head, that is what I was valued for. Okay. So sometimes not speaking the right language to your spouse not only doesn't fill their love tank, but it might deplete it way faster than you realize based on their past experiences. We all have damage and baggage and whatever life experiences that we bring into these relationships. And it's important to communicate our needs, right? We don't always know how to do that, though. So instead of communicating, something we end up doing is we often start to criticize and say, like, I just don't understand why you don't ever hold my hand, right? Things like that. In the book, Dr. Chapman, he explores this, and he said, if you're struggling to feel love between you and your partner, listen for their criticism. He says, my spouse's criticism about my behavior provides me with the clearest clue to their primary love language. They will tell you what they're missing. Even if they didn't communicate it well, even if they didn't communicate it kindly, they're telling you what they're missing. So in our early days, I would constantly ask Eric to hold my hand, but we met in Florida, and I don't know if you know, it's hot there, okay? And I'll tell you a little secret about Eric. His hands get a little sweaty, okay? Which in Florida is more. All right, more. And what I didn't realize is that, especially in a new relationship, that was a little bit of an insecurity for him, right? But then beyond that, I think like a physical discomfort kind of thing. Like you don't want to knowingly decide to make your hand just sweatier, right? So what I assumed was that he didn't love me very much was just a preference discomfort thing for him. Once we were able to have some good conversations about this, we made a compromise. And today we hold hands often, but it's usually for short periods of time. And then when Eric lets go, I don't think that it's because he loves me any less. I don't think that it's because he's mad at me. I don't think whatever things ran through my head at the time, right? And because of these conversations that we've had, when Eric is the one to initiate and reach out to grab my hand to hold it, I feel incredibly loved. When it's time for him to release, it has no diminishing effect. On the flip side, there's also some touches that are very irritating to me. In the same way that the term of endearment turd was not great for my husband and probably damaging. Sorry, babe. There are certain things that really just don't fly for me, and it would create hurt. But one that I think Eric thought was so funny for the longest time was that when I yawned, he liked to stick his finger in my mouth. I don't know if you know, it cuts off your yawn. And though, okay, he wasn't physically touching me, actually, it was in the realm, okay? And he thought it was really cute and funny, like when we first started dating and we're first married, and he'd like die laughing. And I was pissed every single time, okay? And so finally he stopped. And then the funny thing is that once he stopped, I started doing it to him. But once I felt a little more secure, like that really irritating thing wasn't happening to me. I was like, oh, it's funny if it happens to you, right? Anyways, it's important to communicate clearly with your partner and as much as you can to communicate with kindness what your needs are, even if you're feeling at a deficit. On the flip side, it is important for us to, when our partner is trying to communicate, even if they are not being very kind about it, for us to try and hear it. So for someone whose primary love language is physical touch, there's a couple things I want you to consider. There's explicit touches and implicit touches. And I know some of you are worried about the word explicit. That's not what I mean right now, okay? These are touches that require time and thought. So this might be holding hands. This might be cuddling on the couch. When we sit down to watch something, Eric often will sit down and he'll put a pillow like on his hip because he knows I want to lay down on him and be close, okay? But he also doesn't necessarily like want my hair all over him and all the things. So we found some ways, right? But that is explicit, or walking around in public holding hands together, or like a good old-fashioned makeout session. That can be explicit touches. Implicit, though, are simpler, they're faster, they're like, it's a little more impulse, but these can speak volumes. This is like a quick hug as one of you is leaving, right? Or say, I'm already in bed and Eric gets in, and if he leans over and the first thing he does is give me a quick kiss, it's like he didn't think about it, he didn't plan for it, it's just impulse. Another thing that for me as physical touch is sometimes when he passes by me in a room, his hand will just like run across my back or something, or he'll pat my arm. It's super simple. And these are really good ways to help someone feel loved. But okay, so as we're going through our quiz, right? Everyone has a primary love language. And then most of us have a secondary one that we maybe we're not quite as fluent in. Maybe it isn't as deeply impactful, but it's there. So Pastor Eric's second one was receiving gifts. Receiving gifts is demonstrating love through thoughtful gifts that show you are thinking about the person. It's not about materialism. It's not about the actual thing. It's about the meaning behind the gift. Okay, so Pastor Eric, if you need to know, words of affirmation and gifts, right? So those thank you notes we're talking about is a combination of both of those. That's why they were so deeply meaningful for him. But if you need to know how to love on Pastor Eric, you get him a box of candy and you tell him he's pretty, okay? This is what we do. And his birthday is next Sunday. So, listen, he will not physically be here, but in the next couple of weeks, if you buy him a box of candy and tell him he's pretty, you're really helping me out because I've only come so far in these love languages, okay? So help me along on the journey and fill the love tank a little bit, okay? All right, but gift giving is an important part of any relationship, right? And we can tell this because every single culture has a significant gift giving ritual in their marriage ceremony, every culture. So it's important to anybody, but it's really going to speak volumes to some people. What defines a gift is something that you can hold in your hand and say, they were thinking of me. Okay? So a common hang up for someone who has a partner that receives gifts is, well, it's too expensive. Right? We often let our financial viewpoints, or even the person who needs to receive gifts. I think actually for a while we really neglected this in our marriage for Eric because of our financial situation. We didn't feel like we could afford any kind of gift. But let me read that definition again. Something you can hold in your hand that says they were thinking of me. Right? So you don't have to spend a lot of money on it. This can be, think about kids, the biggest way they express this initially is picking the flower in the front yard and bringing it to mom. That's a gift, right? Okay, it can be as small or inexpensive as that, or it can be as expensive as a giant rock that someone puts on her finger when she says yes, right? Okay, so you can tell a general litmus test if you're looking at someone who's married to tell if gifts is part of their love languages and where it kind of ranks is how they treat their wedding ring. If this is like a prized possession and they clean it regularly and they show it off and they always have it on and they always know exactly where it is, that person is probably a gift person. if it's like, I don't know where it is, I never cleaned it, I don't know what happened to it, maybe gifts is not their thing. It doesn't have to be a reflection of their marriage, okay? Gifts may just not be their thing. So when we were when we were dating, Pastor Aeric was working at a church and he was getting paid $250 a month on an internship stipend, and that was it. And I was unaware. I missed the decrease in his spending and the fact that he started eating ramen for 3 meals a day every day. And he took very seriously as a gifts person, the like societal rule of I'm going to do twice my monthly salary and get a ring. And so sorry to say, I'm not a gifts person. And my first reaction was, I'm not going to wear this to work because I worked in a hospital and I didn't want it to get gross. Okay. But today it's one of the most impactful gifts I've ever received because of the thought and the care and everything that he put into it. And to him, his wedding rings are very important, and he wears them. I don't know, you did pull it out. You had to take it off at the lake, and I was wondering. But even then, he had to take it off at the lake, and he looked at me and said, where can we put this that it's not going to go missing? Whereas I would have probably just thrown mine in a bag somewhere, So how they judge that can be, but not every gift needs to be lavish. There are a lot of different ways to love someone receiving gifts. Other things to consider are handmade items, souvenirs from trips. Something his mom has a magnet collection, and so we like to bring back magnets often when we travel. A surprise coffee. Just, I thought of you. I was going here. I thought of you. Here it is. Or just when you're in the grocery store picking up something that you know they like. This is their favorite drink. This is their favorite candy, whatever it might be. So it doesn't have to be lavish. One thing that can pose a challenge in determining love languages, I talked about earlier how these can get mixed up a little bit, is some of them start to look similar, right? So I don't necessarily love receiving gifts, but a lot of people assume I love gifting. Right? I loved our Mother's Day gifts. I love taking the time to pick out what's local, what's pretty, what our mom's going to like, what our mom's not going to buy for themselves. It's quality. I love things like that. But for me, that comes from my secondary language, which is acts of service. So acts of service is showing love by doing helpful things for your partner, especially when done thoughtfully and without being asked. I'm just going to linger on that without being asked for a second, okay? See, I like to give gifts because I'm doing an act of service for someone. And what I've learned is sometimes this is like a physical thing. What this has actually turned into me recently as an expression is to curate meaningful birthday experiences for people that I love. So this past year, we've had a couple of different kind of outrageous birthday celebrations based on the person we're celebrating. And not only do I find joy in showing that to them, but they find joy in receiving that. One of the things that's great about something like that is that receiving a really well-planned birthday party not only checks the box for acts of service, often gifts, definitely quality time, and it's really not that hard to swing in some personal touch or words of affirmation in that setting. So it's kind of like the 5 love languages jackpot if you need a plan, okay? And I can rattle off these plans. If you're trying to plan for someone, I'll tell you what to do. Give me like 5 minutes. You can go do all the work, but I'll give you the plan, all right? So at the end of the day, it's been worth it. But Eric, he has expressed over the years a hate-hate relationship with acts of service. One of the things I think that poses an issue with this is it often tends to look like a lot of household chores, unfortunately, because those are the things that can create the most lift in a lot of people's life. But I will say something that Eric has done over the years that really speaks volume to me is I plan events for a living, and there's always something to be done. Unfortunately, I'm a procrastinator, so there's always something to be done last minute, and I'm kind of panicking. And there's been times in our marriage where this has been a source of income for us, and there's been times in our marriage where Eric has looked at me and said, I am here for whatever you need, whatever you are doing, I am a part of. Tell me how I can help. And so that is an act of service, taking a lift off of someone. But one of the things he claims is that the bar just keeps getting higher and higher and higher with acts of service. And I that brings me to a really interesting point to discover for yourself and other people that every single one of us, we have a daily minimum requirement of love. We have a daily minimum requirement of love. And if you can find someone's primary love language, this might look like Eric needs 1 compliment a day. But that 1 compliment a day, as soon as there's 1 negative thing said, he needs like 3 more, right? So what you need to figure out the math. For me, it wasn't necessarily that Eric could just wash the dishes and we know that we are done. If we wash the dishes, but everything else in the house is in disarray, or if he felt like I was supposed to wash the dishes and he did it, we kind of, our roles conversation kind of came into the mix there and it got a little cloudy. So it can be hard to figure out this daily minimum requirement, but once you know it, we have a thing. I know that if I get a kiss from my husband before I leave, I'm going to feel good throughout my day, right? I don't know what that was. Someone's upstairs. So thinking through that, knowing that can help to fill your partner's love tank. And honestly, it's going to make your work a lot easier, because if you can fulfill the daily minimum requirement consistently, then there's a lot less to worry about. There's a lot less running on E as you're going through life, because once you get to a certain level in that tank, it takes so much more to fill back up, right? So if you're loving someone with acts of service, remember that these require thought, planning, time, effort, and energy. Sorry. With many of these tasks can be around the house. You also can look at things like a surprise act of love by setting up a date night that they walk into the house from. These don't all have to be mundane things. I remember when I was pregnant with Balin, I came home from a shift working at the hospital and I walked in the door and Eric had a bath filled with candles lit and I think a sleeve of like Oreos or something on the side. And I was like, all right, this is great. It filled the tank very quickly. So they don't all have to be boring things. So there's one more love language. We've done 4, right? And this, in the Wallace home, apparently is the least required of us, but it landed right in the middle of both of our tests, and it's quality time, showing love by giving someone your undivided attention, being fully present, and engaging in meaningful conversation or activities together. So here's the thing. Quality time is going on a walk, having deep conversations, enjoying a meal together. Quality time is not sitting on the couch next to each other watching TV. They're not the same. The linchpin of successful quality time is attention and focus. A mere proximity to another person is not the same as togetherness. And if you're loving someone with quality time, this is one of the fastest ways you can deplete that tank beyond, is to spend time in the same room with them, but to not actually be with them. Okay? It's really easy to confuse the activity as the time, but the activity should be the vehicle to togetherness. Okay? A couple of dialects on this to consider: quality conversation and quality activity. They can be combined, but they also can be very different. And they don't have to be long often. This is one of those things where that daily minimum requirement is helpful, but they don't have to be long. Whatever it is that you're doing in your time together is unimportant. I think most of us, if we're not super fluent in this, we picture that moment, if you've seen the movie Baby Mama, and Steve Martin gets Tina Fey to climb up on the table and their foreheads touch and they have 5 minutes of uninterrupted eye contact. It doesn't have to be that, okay? This is not what we mean. It doesn't have to be scary. He gives 5 really practical tips, and especially if you're in conversation with someone who has quality time, to maintain eye contact. Don't multitask. Listen for feelings and confirm that you heard them. Observe their body language, and here's one that he says is hard for everybody no matter what. Refuse to interrupt. Interrupting a quality time person can be incredibly damaging. So if your partner's love language is quality time, you can make them feel loved by providing your undivided attention for even the shortest amount of time, or joining them in an activity that they love, especially if they know you don't like it very much. So you don't like to golf, but your partner loves to golf and is quality time. Get out there with them, hang out. You'll have some good quality conversations in between. You don't have to be good. It doesn't have to be the best day of your life, but it's going to fill their love tank. Worship team, you guys can go ahead and come forward. So something I want to make sure I note here is that even though Pastor Aeric or I, neither one thrives on quality time, it's still important that we don't completely neglect this love language in our relationship, right? We still need to spend quality time together. I don't need words of affirmation to feel loved, but because that's his primary language, if I were to never receive them, I would feel unloved, just as if I wasn't receiving my primary language as well. So you need to be aware of all of them, but become very well practiced in your partner's language. One of our family's favorite versions of quality time is answering like those cheesy car trip, like 10 things to ask your spouse. We just did this a couple of times on the road trip, and it's really good conversation, things you wouldn't think of. We do this with our family as well at the dinner table often. I have an app on my phone that can pull up any question, and sometimes it's really deep, and sometimes it's like, what superhero power would you have? And we have all the kids answer and tell us what it would be. And this allows each member of our family to feel seen, known, and needed. This is one of our values here at Dwell, and we read it like this. This is our value that is supposed to encapsulate the idea of love. We love all people because Jesus does. We are dedicated to reaching those far from God and creating an inclusive church where everyone can encounter him. Like I said at the beginning, love is not just important in one relationship over the other. Our opening verse said that we would be recognized as a follower of Jesus by the way we love people. When Paul wrote his letter to the church of Corinth, he said, 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. As Christians, we're called to love everyone around us, just like Jesus did. And with the 5 love languages, we now have a tool to help us better understand how to love them. When you're unsure how to love, be encouraged that you are already holy and truly loved by a creator that pours love out on you, no matter what your day looks like, no matter whether or not you're nagging, no matter whether or not you're at a deficit. He has gifted you with the ability to love in the same way. John 3:16 says, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life." God has already given everything for you. The question we can reflect on as we worship today is, what am I willing to give for the people that I love and the people around me? Go ahead and stand. I'm going to pray, and then we'll do just a little bit more worship before we head out today. God, thank you so much for the way that you have loved us. Thank you so much for the example of your Son walking through this earth and showing what real, true love looks like. We're grateful to have a deeper understanding today of how we can love those around us. And I pray that you would give the push for everyone to explore not only their primary love language, but those of the people around them, so we know how to love each other better. God, I pray as we worship this morning, you'd show us what we can do to love better. Amen.